Hi, Design Miami. My name is Jean Lynn. I am the founder and creative director of Colony, which is a design gallery and studio based in downtown Manhattan. We represent and celebrate independent American design. Joining me today is Asad Syrkett, who needs no introduction, but was previously with some great publications like Architectural Digest, Architectural Record, and Curbed, but is currently the editor-in-chief at Elle Decor. Thank you for joining us, Asad.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat today.
Yeah, and thank you, Design Miami, for facilitating this conversation because I think it's really important. So I want to jump right in because we don't have the most time in the world. The conversation today is really about representation and diversity in design. And, you know, we've had a lot of conversations in private, but I feel like we're at this place in this industry where we've kind of only recently started as a group waking up to all of these issues around underrepresentation, under acknowledgement of BIPOC in design. And, you know, with so many companies sort of in their nascency of trying to figure out how to right the ship. And with you as the first Black editor-in-chief of Elle Decor, not only Elle Decor, but I think the first Black editor-in-chief of any major American design publication. You've kind of been put into this like leader role in this, you know, for better, for worse. And I don't know if this was a calculated, deliberately timed decision or if it was happenstance. But I know I feel like you're in this leadership role in this conversation. So, you know, I think we can't really expect people to follow our lead until we allow them into our personal narrative and our personal experiences. And that's why you were the first and only person that I wanted to have this conversation with, because I feel
thanks, Jean.
I just feel like it's so important, but also it's, you know, there are a lot of conversations that happen when the cameras aren't rolling that I feel like deserve to be kind of in the public narrative and can be sort of learned from and taken from. So
sure, totally.
How do you feel?
I feel ready. I'm ready to talk.
Okay, you're ready.
Let's do it.
My first question is, as the first Black editor-in-chief of a major American design publication, how has the experience affected the way you approach your work and affected the way you think about editorial and design as a whole? I mean, maybe it hasn't, but I'm just wondering, because you were in an editorial role, you've been in an editorial role since I've known you, but this layer of social leadership seems to be a new one for you, and on such a large scale. So I'm just wondering, like, how you're navigating it, how you're sort of approaching the work ahead of you.
Yeah, no, I think it's a question that I don't ask myself every day, because if I did, I would never get any work done. You know, it's like my first job with this specific role is to make a beautiful magazine, a magazine that feels rigorous and intellectually engaged, a magazine that reflects where design is now and where I feel and my editorial team feels it should be going forward. And the weight of being a first and kind of the paradox of being a first, which is something that the editor-in-chief of Harper's Bazaar in the US, Samir Nasser, has talked about before. You know, that paradox of being first is that you don't have a template that you are following, and you also have several jobs that you're trying to juggle, which is, the job of just doing the work, and also the job of feeling like and I'll just speak for myself, feeling like I need to show up in a deeper way, in a more authentic way, in potentially a more vulnerable way, because I am a first, and because there are not people who look like me and have my background who I have seen in positions of editorial authority like this before.
So
And so I don't ask myself every day, but it does impact how I strategize, right? I mean, on a daily basis, I'm just an editor doing his job, but
yeah,
every small interaction I have completely ladders up to this experience of being a first and wanting to really represent, and also really want to accomplish things that are way bigger than me as an individual, or me as a first. I think, what does it mean to have an editor like me in this position? That's a question I think is probably more useful in the work. It's like, it means that we have a greater responsibility to tell design stories that may not have been told before I
what
was
about
in
your
this role.
team? What about your team? Like, are they
Hmm.
acutely aware of?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's hard
Yeah,
to, even before I stepped into the room, I mean, it was hard to avoid the impact, obviously, of the protests after the murder of George Floyd in the summer of 2020. And also, I think just our language is so much more sophisticated now to talk about race and diversity and inclusion and equity and all of those things. Um, and even though, right, language is not enough and awareness is not enough, and kind of um, finding ways to talk about those things are not enough on their own, but I do think it has meant that my team was primed in a way that they would not have been before I joined in September of 2020, because all of those conversations were happening very kind of actively in that moment. And also because whether or not you were in an industry, in every industry, there was no industry that was not impacted by the conversations about diversity and inclusion that were
yeah.
happening then. And so they were unavoidable. So I do think my team, and I have hired a handful of editors, but I also inherited half my team. And I think the full team was already really kind of in it. It's like we're all thinking about those things, even if our respective personal experiences are vastly different, and cannot and are not the same. Cannot be and
In
are
the
not the same.
conversation, like, does it come up in the editorial process? When you say you don't
Mhm.
think about it every day, is it
I don't think about myself being a first every day.
right? I
Right,
understand
exactly.
that. I can
Yeah.
understand that, but I guess what I'm trying to grasp is, and I think it is more of like a team question than a personal
Mm,
question, because I wonder, like, I've seen personally, I've seen a lot of um, evolution in the pages of Elle Decor
mm.
since you've taken the reins. And I guess the question is, how does that how does
How does
that
it happen?
happen? Because
Yeah.
it's like, I think people who are watching this are hopefully all sort of trying to figure out how to evolve themselves professionally
Hmm.
and personally. And it's like small steps and big steps and small micro and macro moves. But I think
Hmm.
that one of the things I admire about what you've done since you came to Elle Decor is how much you can feel the evolution happening within the pages. And
Mm.
I
Thank you.
wonder if your team is, I mean, it sounds like your team is acutely aware and very,
Acutely aware and also really invested. Sorry to
yeah,
cut you off. I just am
no,
like, I'm that question, I think, well, you're asking like where does the momentum come from to make
right,
change and make it happen clearly and quickly? I mean, the momentum comes from me. I'm the editor in chief. So I say this is our mandate, this is the direction we're moving. But also, I mean, my own management and leadership style is very kind of extractive. Like I want to pull people toward the goal by being encouraging and positive and empathetic and vulnerable about my own concerns and my own experiences and my own reasons for wanting to cover design in the ways that we've begun to cover design in the
yeah,
pages of the magazine. And it turns out that that pulls amazing work and ideas out of my editorial team, because really, the mission of a magazine, yes, there's kind of brand DNA, like this is what the brand covers, this is what it's always covered. But there's also, I mean, and I don't take full credit for this, although yes, I am the editor and I'm making this decision. Like, I am saying this is the path we're going on. This is the journey we're charting. And so give me your ideas that are about people who have not been given a platform, about people who have not been spotlighted by these magazines in the past, about people doing interesting work in places we don't usually cover. I think geographic diversity goes a long way, and then bringing in new voices and people with different backgrounds and experiences. And so, yeah, my team is acutely aware, but also I am encouraging my team to think in new ways about what this magazine can cover. And so the ideas I'm getting from my team are phenomenal. I mean, I'm very lucky to have the team that I have, but it takes some, I use the word extractive, which I think has a bit of like a negative connotation in some contexts, but I mean it in, you know, I'm not pushing people toward a thing. I'm
Sure.
saying, here's what I would love to do. Here's where I want to go. Like, I want to get there. How we get there is up to all of us together. So what do you think we should do to get there? Are we going on foot? Are we taking a train? Like, how are we getting there? And then everybody on my team has offered ideas. You know, I have a great set of journalists on my team who have really fantastic ideas. And so that has been a treat.
Can we dig a little bit deeper into some of
Mm-hmm.
the specific issues or pieces that you feel have been milestones in the
Sure.
journey that you guys
Yeah,
have?
there are two that I wanted to call attention to. And the first is my first official cover with the magazine was our first official issue with the magazine was our March 2021 issue, which was an art themed issue about creatives and collectors and connoisseurs at home. That was like the cover language on the issue. And it was the first time we had ever done an illustrated cover of Elle Decor, that the magazine in its 31-year history has ever had an illustrated cover. And, you know, the magazine had always been known for charting its own path in shelter publications. When the magazine was founded in 1990, there were a series of still life images that were the cover. So they weren't full interiors with a room the way that we kind of conceptualize or think about shelter magazine covers. They were like these still lives.
You have to talk about what you guys did with the tables.
Yeah, so I will. So right.
Okay.
So I said this magazine has a history of doing innovative things with the cover, but I want to take that a step further. So let's do an illustrated cover. I had this whole concept. And so the concept for the illustrated cover was to illustrate a room that has been influential in American and really Western interior design, kind of broadly. The room is a 1950s salon, a 1950s era London salon by the decorator Nancy Lancaster, who was an American expat who grew up in Virginia. And she was someone who was enamored by the antebellum South. I read her biography, which was a trip. And she was enamored by the antebellum South. And so she brought this kind of Virginian gentility to the living rooms and homes of London's kind of moneyed class, whether that was kind of new money or old money. And I found that connection really interesting, that she was bringing this this kind of American decorative tradition, or this American way of thinking about what home means and what domestic spaces are and how they're decorated, to London. And there was so much of the reverse happening before that. And so in this room that Nancy Lancaster decorated, she had chosen these two side tables, these two small side tables that were blackamoor side tables. And that decorative style is a 17th century Italian decorative style, or European decorative style, that used the black body as a decorative element. So often you'd see a bust of a Black woman with a head covering, and that was a vase. And then there would be flowers, tulips or something coming out of it. So these side tables were two crouching Black figures who almost looked like contortionists. And they were crouched and their backs held up plinths. And there were two of them on either side of the little sitting area in this 1950s London salon that was painted bright yellow. It's called the Yellow Room. And I saw the image for the first time probably in 2011, like right as I was finishing college. I studied architectural history in school, and so I just came across it in a magazine or in a book. And I was the room is so joyous. This yellow is so bright and beautiful. And then I felt I had this visceral response to seeing these two tables that depict enslaved people
Yeah.
in a position of servitude and diminishment. And it was all presented, of course, in the most like, isn't this the most beautiful room? Isn't this all so fabulous? Well, it's not all so fabulous. There are elements of this room that point to an incredibly exploitative history that is inextricable from the history of interior design and architecture. And so that is what I want. That's a story I wanted to tell with my first cover. Sorry, so go ahead.
Your eye found it when you first saw it. It wasn't out to you.
No, I just, as my eye roved around the image, I was like, oh, look at this chandelier, look at this desk, look at this sofa, look at these tables. Oh, what is that? I kind of, I zoomed in on it because it was so violent, because it was so violent.
That's an experience that is unique to racial minorities in design that isn't talked about, is that there's a different, we can look at something and see it in a different way because of our personal experiences that can be injuring, and you don't really know when it happens to you. You don't really know what to do.
Yes. And that is an incredibly common experience, right? For people of the global majority, that is an incredibly common experience. Yeah. And so what do you do with that? I mean, I don't always have the answer to that, but in this specific case, I thought the thing to do is to talk about it, to point it out, to go, I see what is happening in this image. And from this new perch where I have the ability to call it out and address it, I'm going to do that. And the reception to that cover was actually really, really strong and overwhelmingly positive. Of course, I received some choice words from people who do not want to have those conversations because of fear or discomfort or fear of discomfort. And that's okay too. That's kind of the point. It's like, if you're not ruffling any feathers, and I know I've said this in other interviews I've given about kind of this process, if you're not ruffling any feathers, you're probably not doing something worth doing. But the response was really positive, and I was really glad that people were down to have this conversation with us at the magazine.
And you felt like the audience everyone was with you. They got it.
Because the trick is the cover, which I have it here somewhere, but the cover is it's a beautiful image. Yeah. And that's the trick. And so one crucial thing I didn't mention is we had a Black illustrator, Rochelle Baker, who's based in Detroit, remix the image for us. So she edited out those two black and more side tables and replaced them with an imagined Black visitor to the salon. So there's this woman in a bit of an ambiguous facial expression, but kind of in a contemplative position, sitting in a lounge chair in that room, making eye contact with the viewer, with the reader. And I think the beauty of the cover and that bright yellow that we wanted to bring from the original room onto our cover drew people in, and then they realized what was happening, which I want to. That's how I want to pull people into these conversations.
I mean, what I thought was
so luring them in.
Kind of genius about that cover, that first cover that you were fully responsible for, was bringing people in to the conversation without having to necessarily shout it, and doing it in a way that felt subversive and almost subtle, but you know what I mean? I feel like that's something that that's something that we struggled with before BLM and the summer of BLM and George Floyd and all that, was how do we bring this to the attention of people who should be at their attention without shouting, or without, and maybe there needs to be shouting, but in design we don't.
Yeah, exactly. People
design, you can't.
Right, exactly. No, I think you're totally right. I think there was a lot of shouting and fervor and urgency in those protests and in those months in the summer of 2020. And it just reminded me every mode of action has its purpose.
Yeah.
And my mode of action was going to be subtle or kind of quieter,
Right.
and that was important for me because I also, we're an interior design and architecture and just design in general magazine, and so I want to be sensitive to the fact that we are not on the front lines of activism or
Yeah.
social change in that same way, but I have and we as a team now have something to say and
Yeah.
want people to engage with those questions and those issues within interior design and architecture.
Yeah. I feel like we all, like, you have a platform, we have a platform, like, we all have our own platforms that we're able to engage these conversations with. And the key is sort of like finding our voices and our methods and our sort of choice of path
Hmm.
to say the things that we think are important.
Yeah.
I don't want to run out of time, but I do want to talk about how, I mean, there were like way more questions, and I'm sorry.
Just ask.
There's
We'll
so much
just keep
to talk
going.
about, but I feel like the big thing that's kind of like rolling around my head right now is it felt like, when was your appointment announced? It was
It
after.
was, yeah, it was announced in September, and I
Right.
started in September. So I think I had a week between the announcement and my actual start date.
Right. I
Um,
feel like
yeah.
that summer and like the month sort of preceding that summer felt like this boiling point for us.
Hmm.
Um, those of us who think progressively and are politically active, and now things are sort of finding they're kind of like, if it was boiling and like really rowdy before, things are sort of
Hmm.
settling down into these like calm, smooth waves. And I think that the fear is bringing that momentum through into forever, or
Hmm.
finding a way to have this lasting impact on not only
Right.
our behavior, our work, but also into the future and like future generations. So I think I think I want to like, I would love to wrap up by just a few words on the future and
Mm.
you you guys at Elle Decor, you guys, BIPOC design professionals of influence, you guys, Asad Syrkett, like how you are looking towards the future with hope,
Yeah.
and with hope and action. Let's say
Mm,
that.
mm, mm. I love that you said with hope and action because I always twin those as well.
Oh,
It's like it's great to hope, but the action is where the potential lies.
exactly. Yeah.
How are we doing it? I think there are three quick ways we're doing that. I'll make them quick. I'll say they are not quick, but I'll make them quick for the purposes of this conversation. And the first thing is to have fun. I know that what we're discussing is really can be and is really heavy, very much layered, very complex. And if I can show people that it's possible to have those intensely difficult conversations and also celebrate the incredible work that comes out of our design community, our design industry, that's going to pull more people into the conversation and make them want to engage. So we have to have fun. I want to make a beautiful magazine that people want to subscribe to and read online and read in print. And so that's the first thing. The second thing also is just to keep going, which it's like a body in rest, a body at rest wants to stay at rest. And so I have found that like if we don't just keep talking about things as often as it makes sense to, then you're right, the lava does cool and that sense of urgency can harden. And I don't want that. I do want to capitalize on and build on top of that momentum from last summer and in the years that the 11 years that I've been a design journalist in this industry, where I have been feeling like there was just not enough being done. There just was not enough being done. And I had not previous to this been in a position in as broad a position to actually do something about that. And then the third thing too is just to like acknowledge one's own limitations and be open to being wrong and to being corrected. It's like I am not going to get everything right. I have blind spots. That's why hopefully I work with a team that can complement those blind spots and give me new information and advice and steer things and conversations in new ways. And if we can do those three things, I mean, yes, I'm like watering it down for the purposes of a 30-minute chat, but like if we can focus on like truly having fun and bringing people into the conversation and doing it from a place of, yes, critique. And this is just my own stance. Obviously, you don't have to like have fun, bring joy into it if that's not your thing. But
Yeah.
for me to just self-sustain and get up every day and deal with assorted nonsense and also get my job done, I have to bring in a sense of fun and joy.
Yeah.
And then to really kind of keep going and admit when you don't have all the answers. I think that those are the ways to keep this moving forward in design and outside of design.
I want to add one that I heard from you guys is, what you said it kind of earlier is you guys are knocking on doors that haven't been knocked on, and you're staying open to and letting people in. You're staying open to letting more people in to a world that I think has traditionally been much more about exclusivity than it has been about inclusivity.
Absolutely.
And that is, in all of our roles, we can all practice that, because whether it's in design, whether it's at Elle Decor, whether it's here at Colony or wherever it is, it's about finding where we've been closed before and opening those channels up.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Okay. Yeah. Well, Asad, I adore you.
The feeling is mutual. And thank you so much for inviting me to talk. And thank you to the Design Miami crew for facilitating this. This is really nice.
I mean, I appreciate you so much. Everything is so well deserved, and please keep going, because it's so important. And I've been watching somewhat from the sidelines, sometimes just right up in your face, watching with great admiration, cheering you on. I think a lot of people out in the design world are also. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Talk soon.